Yeah, I'm here to give you a very brief gist on what this course offers, and also to let you know like what could be the probable expectations from the course. And yeah, after this course, even you have still any doubts or anything, you can still get back to us, to the organizers, and they will patch up a call with me, and so that to understand further on your expectations. So with that, let me just start the session. So yeah, I think we are here to actually discuss about the Azure Data Engineering course. So this being, I would say that when I call the Azure Data Engineer, so basically we are talking about Azure as a cloud platform from one of the provider. That means the provider is none other than Microsoft. So Azure had come up, I mean, it's a product or a service offering that had come from Microsoft, right? And we are trying to discuss about the Azure Data Engineering course. So just to expand on that, so there are two parts here. So one thing is, you're trying to see a role there, that means data engineer, and you're seeing an Azure, that means a cloud provider. So what is happening here? So basically, if I have to expand, or I should say elaborate on the current context, so we are talking something on the cloud and a role, right? So basically we are saying Azure data engineer. So if you see this is the provider and this is the role that we are trying to understand on. So to understand more about this, right, we need to understand what has the history of the cloud. I mean, why is this getting too much of importance or a significance nowadays? So why are organizations shifting towards the cloud? Okay, so the first part is we will understand about this cloud part, right? Number one, and then we will go for what is this data engineering role that we are trying to understand and try to take a guess on. And we'll also see some of the prerequisites and how are we going to address that prerequisites, considering the fact that some of you, I mean, based on the feedback that I received from the classes earlier on too, okay, so few of you might be completely new, or you might not have the complete background, but you might be aware of something on the database and all. So we'll try to understand what are we going to cover as a part of prerequisite, and also what are we going to learn in this particular course. Okay, so if I have to take up the first point, so that means the cloud engineering part here. Okay, so we are talking about cloud being the provider, Azure being the provider. Okay, and this is an offering that had come from Microsoft. And why a kind of an enterprise, or your company that you're working for, or the client that you work for? Okay, what is the current challenge that they're having, and what is that bringing in this cloud part of it? Okay, let us understand only the cloud part of it. Okay, so if you notice, for any company to actually build just give me a second. Uh, Sorry for that. I had to take that call. Okay. Yeah, coming back. So we are trying to understand the two different sets of the role or the course that we are learning about the cloud Azure and the cloud data engineer, right? So we are talking about what is the actual need, or what is the current challenge that the current clients or the enterprises or the companies that you're working for is facing, right? So if you if you consider earlier, like in late and in the early 2000 and 2005, 2010, okay, suppose if you had to set up something with respect to or you're trying to set up a web server, or you're trying to just create one website itself, right? So during that time, or you have to handle an MNC client. So what you had to do is, I mean, you had to spend time analyzing what is the IT infrastructure that is needed, and they have to physically understand what is that server that you require, and how do we actually go about purchasing it. How about the license costs with respect to that, and are we having the right professional skill to actually manage this? And then we need to check for a space, then the networking requirements. Okay, think of this scenario, like you have to do everything on your own. I mean, basically your company, or there should be a skilled professional who had to actually assess everything and had to kind of do this logistics related calculation, and then at least so it might take around like time around turnaround time around at least 4 weeks. Okay, that's the bare minimum that I had given, but it will even take more time when you have to physically acquire the assets and all that. Okay, but now considering the fact that, no, that is one angle of it, like about the time. But how about the finances, right? Suppose if you have to purchase some server outright, okay, it might cost you so many dollars, right? So, but in the same scenario, okay, it is just not about the physical servers. I mean, there will be some other physical assets, or I should say the professionals that you need to engage. So everything is a kind of a cost related, attached to cost and as well as time. But now with this advent of this cloud coming into the picture, okay, so you are in a situation to assess this cost, gain more control over what is happening towards the costs and all, right? So that's the main advantage, I should say. Like uh, I mean, lot of IT infrastructure that is spent, or I should say the costs that are spent, are moved into this I mean, majority part are also moved into this particular categories, right? And remember, you are trying to acquire something, right? That means you are trying to purchase that outright, and you are owning that asset. And definitely that asset itself is a depreciating asset. It is never a kind of an asset which will appreciate. So any asset that you possess, the physical asset that you possess, right, like server, electronics, so you know that it is a depreciating asset. So ultimately what is happening is, there could be projects which will be running only for 3 months or 6 months or 1 year. Okay, their lifespan is less, but still you had to go for this kind of a outright purchase, and you had to possess and everything. Okay, so as an alternative, this cloud providers came into the picture, saying that, okay, we can provide you that particular infra that is required. And I mean, that means the physical assets, or that networking, or the space, everything they are going to own up now. Okay, that is what Azure, or AWS, or Google Cloud Platform. So we have three players, major players, I should say. That one is Azure, and the other one is Amazon, and the third one is Google. So these being the major players who are trying to offer more services, or with respect to the data analytics and all. Okay, there are others also, Cloudera, Hortonworks related, and there are many other players. But I should say primarily or majorly there are these three players who are offering a large variety of offerings, that means the cloud offerings with respect to data analytics. Okay, what are they actually saying, right? So see, if you have to own it, or I should say you have to do something on, or some work on the server, Okay, it is not that you have to own it, you can subscribe to it. So this is something that is coming into the picture, just like how we subscribe to our OTT platforms, right? So we subscribe. So they're saying you can subscribe a server, you need not actually own it. Okay, that is what is coming into the, I mean, which had already come and it is already in full swing. So whatever current client engagements that are present, so they are just not trying to limit themselves into the on-premise infrastructure or their existing infrastructure. They're expanding, or they're trying to release, I mean to say, they're trying to let that deprecated, okay, and trying to move everything into cloud. So what is that advantage that they're going to get when they're trying to move that? So one thing is that trying to get more control on the expenses. Okay, anything on the cloud, right? So it is all you have to purchase or you have to subscribe. Okay, and there is a clear cut cost for the subscriptions that you have. Clear cut, that means suppose if you have to engage a monthly server, you have to engage a server for a month, so this is the cost that you have. So we are getting more control. That means you're able to predict your costs a better. Suppose down the lane, there was a one small engagement that your company had assigned to us, saying that this is required only for 6 months and thereafter it's of no use, right? So you're able to predict what are the exact costs for those 6 months, and you're able to gain more insights, right? So over the finances, over the requirements with respect to people who are needed. So with this kind of a flexibility that we have on cloud, okay, and this had taken the primary seat now. Okay, now we need not involve ourselves in physically with respect to acquiring of any assets. Okay, suppose I'll just quickly show you one of the portal. Okay, and I will try to show you how much money, or if I have to create something, right? So just to introduce to you, this is this portal that we have. Okay, and suppose I just wanted a SQL server. Okay, I'll simply say create. Okay, you can clearly see after you start creating and adding database, you will be able to see that. But let me go to uh, any server. Virtual machine. So when I say virtual machine, so this is one of the portal that you see. Do not get too much of confusion into what is this and all, but I'm just trying to show you how easy is to actually go ahead, and you can see that. So suppose if you wanted to have one particular server with 8 GB memory, so it is more about spending 5,000 rupees per month. So that the same server upfront, if you have to actually pay, that might even just cost you around 2 lakhs or something like that. But here it is almost showing INR. So I am just telling 2 lakhs considering the recent ad that I saw about possessing a physical server asset. Okay, and the networking requirements related to it, everything, there are many other things that are there. Okay, and you can directly image that with whatever OS that we wanted upfront, immediately, without worrying much about it. You can see that the pricing, you can see that you can see, and it is just not this, you have large number of varieties, whether if you want only a smaller server where you can spend only 3,000 rupees per month. So in this way, we can really think of the advantages that business is having, right? So we ourselves, or I should say as a developer myself, okay, suppose if you have to set up something, I'm in a flexible way of taking this up and using this whenever I wanted. I can just simply stop the server as soon as I create it, okay, and just make use of it only for a couple of days that I wanted actually. Okay, so that's the level of flexibility that it is offering. So it is actually, I'm in no way to kind of a configure a server, or that is again a different task, right? So I did not really worry about all those hassles, and I'm able to set up this neat and clean. So you can clearly see that flexibility that is being offered. So the only thing is you have to subscribe. Okay, so it is avoiding us the upfront costs or the capital costs that you spend on IT infra. Okay, so yeah, I mean, namely, if I have to take a session, I can take more number of sessions only about explaining this cloud and what are the advantages and all that. Okay, but just to give you a gist, why are we more interested on the cloud side? So this is one small example. Okay, now quickly let's jump into this role part that we are trying to discuss. Okay, so yes, the data engineer. So I should say, like, this is not a new role, okay, but recently, if you have seen, we started getting uh, slowly the enterprises, or they're getting into a mode of a role based kind of a calling, or I should say, we are not talking about any softwares now. We are not talking about any particular technology now. Okay, we are talking about something on a role based. That means, what is the role that you are serving? Okay, so I'm a data engineer. So earlier, people used to talk about, yeah, I work on this particular technology and all that. No, that that kind of a I should say, where we kind of a call out saying that, okay, I am a Oracle DB engineer, or I should say, so basically when you talk about the data engineering role itself, right? So it is little technology agnostic. So be it any source, like be it any the target platform that you're trying to work, right? So basically you will be able to kind of a workout, just not limiting yourself into one particular technology as such. But one thing that is required is you need to have some basic understanding of how the data looks, how the data appears and all, right? So let me discuss about the prerequisites and all that at a later point of time. But let me just have you a gist on what is this data engineering role. So I was talking about an MSBI engineer. So we used to say Microsoft BI engineer. So that's no more. So we are calling ourselves as the data engineers. Okay, and just coming to the more and give more understanding of what we actually do as data engineers on a daily scenario is that, okay, we try to understand the client requirements with respect to their data needs. Okay, so like for example, I will take one example. So the client comes up saying that I have a source, okay, residing in one Azure blob, and I want to publish, or I want that to be modeled, or I should say to be present in a report. Okay, so this is a kind of a very basic level in explaining in simple English. Okay, so this would be a client requirement. Okay, saying that I have some data in some odd place, okay, and I want that to be pushed or kind of a published into a report or something. So as a data engineer, my perspective towards this particular statement would be like this. So he's saying like there is one source, okay, there is one source. First thing is we need to identify what is that source, okay. Then we need to understand it is residing on blob, okay. So he's saying that he's residing on blob. That means there is some security enabled on that blob. I need to access that. So that means you will be thinking about the security side of things. That means your credentials, usernames, password, right? What is the security around it? Okay. Then he's saying, I want that data to be present in a report. Okay. If it was simply the source data, okay, then he might have directly pointed to that source itself and created a report. But he's saying, I want that data to be present, or I should to be showcased into a report. So that means there is some kind of a data mashing, or I should say some kind of a transformation that needs to be done. Okay, so you're understanding things like I'm talking about the functionality. I'll just go a little in depth on what is explaining on what is the source, what is the security and all. But you're understanding with the different functionalities that a data engineer would be involved and his perspectives. Right? You need to transform that data, and you need to think of what is the target. That means target or sink. We call this as sink. This is nothing but where are we actually putting our data into. Okay, and finally the report. So the report that we try to generate, right, that can be anything. It can be generated in any front end tools. That means either Power BI, or there could be any custom tools or custom reporting requirements that it has, custom tools, or they say Tableau or ClickU. Okay, there are many other things like this. Okay, but for you to provide your data or have your data into some kind of a target sync, right? So first we have to, a data engineer has to think on all this scenario. So this is at a very high level, but there could be number of things that might be coming in between. Okay, so that is what we will try to discuss in detail. So what are the different functionalities, or a data engineer will consider himself, right? So this is how, like, I mean, on a day-to-day basis, what the work that a data engineer does, right? So this involves in thinking on these lines, and finally ultimately the user might be requiring that into one kind of a report, right? So we are here to actually learn more things on, or more about this four, or I should say the source, thinking of security, thinking about transformations, thinking about the target in sync. But at the same time, during this attempt, you being as a developer, you need to maintain some standards, right? You need to have a code repository, isn't it? Where you can actually, where you are actually storing that data or storing that code somewhere, and they should be, you should be thinking on the lines of deployments, right? And as I said, you should be also be thinking about security, isn't it? Okay, thinking about deployment, you should be thinking about security. That means how is the security managed? Like suppose we can't, data being a very sensitive one, okay, so it can contain anything, like our personal data also, right? And it could be some data with respect to what machinery does, okay, any, it could be anything, right? So definitely we should give a heed on about the security side of things. We will try to understand how in Azure, okay, we will try to manage the security. Okay, so there is something called Azure Key Vault, which takes care of the security side of things. Okay, and the transformations part. Okay, so this is where the actual we need to have our data twisted, transformed, or wrangled or mashed up in such a way that it becomes useful, right? So there'll be huge number of data logs being generated. Like even when I'm trying to deliver this class, okay, every click that might be there, that might have got recorded, when we can't say, right? So whenever you subscribe or you browse through the mobile app, okay, on the every activity that you do, everything is a log, right? So but the only thing is, if you just have the log, that's of no use, right? You need to transform, mash the data in such a way that the business should understand, isn't it? So that is where the transformations come into the picture, okay? And these transformations and all, we will try to understand more about this in what we are going to do using Azure Data Factory, and then we will try to do things on Azure Data Bricks. Okay, so within the Azure Data Factory, we'll have something called mapping data flows. Okay, so in our classes, what we are going to do is, the main thing involved is having that raw data extracted and putting that into a form where people can, or the business can use it. So for that, we have to transform the data, and for transformation we'll take help of tools like Azure Data Factory, Databricks, and mapping data flows. Okay, and you will have number of targets, number of sources and all. Okay, in our class, what we'll try to understand is, we'll try to set up something on, okay, SQL, Azure SQL. We'll try to set up a server, and we will be trying to see more and more exercises or the demos with respect to what you can do on Azure SQL and the data lake that we are going to create as a part of this course. Okay, so but now the question comes, yeah, I mean, you said like we will discuss about the Azure SQL, and now I'm going to discuss about some of the prerequisites, right? So basically, for you to understand, okay, on the entire landscape, okay, I'll just show you one diagram, okay, where it will try to showcase to you the entire landscape of what we are in a gist. But let me tell you, we are not going to discuss on all the other services. Okay, we are going to discuss on the data factory that you are seeing here, this one. Okay, and you are going to understand more on what is this storage mechanisms that are there in the cloud. Okay, and then how are we trying to put that into a semantic layer? So when I say semantic layer, a layer that business uses for their reporting purposes. Okay, so we are going to discuss about the data warehouse. I mean, we'll try to create some dimension and fact tables, and we will understand how we can transform or mash up the data and push it into a and create the dimension and fact tables. And we will try to make use of something called Azure Data Bricks, okay, which has a Spark background, okay, and try to understand what is it that it will offer to us, okay. And then, so this is more of on the different tools that you are trying to make use of for your data engineering, I mean to say, for your transformations or anything. But as a developer, okay, you also need to consider the fact that, okay, that you are managing your code properly. So that we were going to discuss in the Azure DevOps. So that means this course is just not about we teaching you one tool and you just go ahead and proceed yourself. Okay, when you are in a scenario of you coming into this Azure world, Azure data engineering world, okay, you should not be a kind of an you should not think that there is something new coming in. Okay, that okay, as a developer you need to have some end-to-end knowledge on how you manage your code and all, right? So that is where the DevOps comes into the picture. And I was just talking about the Azure Key Vault, right? So I was talking about the security. So how do you manage your security, how you perform, how you set up your environment, okay? And understanding about the Azure Active Directory. This Active Directory is nothing but it is like a big network pipe. Okay, think like this is a big directory that is connecting all your cloud resources. Okay, you will get an insight on what is this Azure Active Directory. Okay, in understanding. So these are the some of the basic things that you need to get a hold of. Okay, and let me come to the prerequisites part. And how do you actually manage your costs? I mean, how do you browse through the different costs that are incurring in your cloud subscription that you create? Okay, and how do you monitor your particular pipelines or whatever resources that you create? So all these things will be a kind of a not related on I should say, as a developer you need to understand all these things, okay, as a developer, but not really as a data engineer. If you just think on the transformations part, right, you don't really need to worry about that, but that is not it, right? So in the actual environment or in the client workspace that you work on, okay, you need to understand how do you actually monitor and govern your code, monitor and govern your security, monitor and govern the resources that you create. So that is something that also will be clear, I mean, will be you'll get an understanding as a part of this course. Okay, now let me just quickly so whatever that I've explained, right? So far you might not have heard about data factory, data lake and all that. So these are different Azure services. Okay, the the things that you need to understand are something like this, the prerequisites. Okay, I think I was writing it somewhere. Okay, fine, anyways. So as a part of prerequisites, okay, we need to understand what is this, what is a table, what is a view, what is a stored procedure. So if you are not already aware on what is this about, okay, so what we are trying to do is we are trying to take a couple of sessions for you to actually make you set up. So basically we will try to uh, help you out in creation of server and its respective database, okay, in Azure. Okay, so this is one of the prerequisites, that you need to have some understanding of what is a table, what is a view, what is a stored procedure. Okay, and at the same time we need to understand how the storage actually works. Storage in cloud, so that meaning Azure blobs, data lakes. So we will take a session on what is the storage about, and then help you in creating the blobs, containers. Okay, so we will be using this SQL and storage blobs extensively on the data lake while we are trying to do our demos and all that. Okay, also for this you need to have a basic understanding on how this will we have to create, and how do we create a table, views, stored procedures. So we'll have a session for that, and as well as a session on how the storage works and how do you create a Azure blob for yourself. Okay, and then to perform these activities you need to have some basics of Azure, and you need to understand how do we actually navigation in the Azure portal. So we need to understand this so that you are well versed when you are actually working in your client environment. Now, after this course, what you will be able to do is that, okay, so basically you'll understand the basics of Azure SQL, and you will try to have your ETL pipelines. You will be able to create the ETL pipelines in Azure Data Factory. We will understand how to make use of a data lake, how to store the data. Okay, you will understand things about the maintenance, code maintenance, like Git and DevOps, and try to create a CI/CD pipelines. Okay, and you will try to understand. You will get an understanding of what is this Azure Key Vault and how the security actually works. Okay, so these are the different kind of things that you will finally end up learning in this course. And as I said, these being prerequisites, and we know that some of you might not have the complete knowledge about what I'm talking about, but we will take some session with respect to how this actually works. Okay, how what is SQL, and writing some basic queries and trying to understand what is a table, view, store procedures. Then we'll try to go to into the blobs where we set this as a target. Okay, and then we will try to understand some basics of Azure, like how to create resources. Okay, creation of resources. Okay, and managing them. Okay, some of the best practices with respect to for you to manage the things while you're under the subscription, right? Regarding the pricing tiers and all that. And how do you do your cost management in the Azure portal? So all these three we will be trying to cover to you, and then we will be proceeding into the actual Azure Data Factory, your Data Factory and Azure Data Bricks. Okay, so I think I had tried to outline you on the prerequisites that are required. Okay, and then we will have sessions on these prerequisites, and then we will be proceeding into the actual demos and exercises with respect to what we have on the Azure Data Factory and Data Bricks. Okay, so this is how I will say, like, we will outline the course. Okay, and what are the different other understanding that you will get at the end of the course that you opt for. And also to let you know, okay, I was just talking about this, right? What is, how a data engineer, what he does and all that, right? So basically this particular diagram that you are seeing, okay, so this is trying to explain you at a very basic high level. Okay, so at a high level, okay, when I say high level, it is at a bird's eye view, but there are a lot of details that we will get into. Okay, like if you see, I will say that the extraction that we call, right, that we do onto the different sources is nothing but data ingestion. And then we'll have something called the data preparation, the transformation part that I'm trying to make you understand. Then I was talking like we will try to create the facts and dimensions that are there, right? So that is nothing but the data warehousing. And then the BI semantic model. So basically, wherever the business comes into the picture and try to get some data, right? So there is a layer, that is what they'll going to fetch it from the data warehouse. And the reporting side, yes. So there are many other tools. We are not going to discuss any particular tool here with respect to Power BI or anything, but our concentration would be more on this data prep, data ingestion, and trying to create facts and dimensions. So that is how we are trying to outline this course. And I did mention about the prerequisites that are there. Okay, and what we'll do to cover also as a part of the prerequisites. Okay, so there are Azure is okay. Azure, I saw some ping from someone. Sorry, I did not notice that, Dheeraj. So Azure SQL is RDBMS, and it is not NoSQL. Okay, but see, if you already worked on NoSQL, I think that is something nice to have. But yeah, SQL, Azure SQL itself is like a relational database that is present on cloud. So earlier we used to say MS SQL, right? So we have different MS SQL versions and all that. But yeah, this is relational database only. I mean, you can see, visualize the things on like on a table and all that. But unlike NoSQL, which has the key value pairs, yeah, there are many other NoSQL databases. Okay. So I'll just open up certification for Azure Data Engineer. Yes, there are Azure Data Engineering Certification. So that is nothing but DP203. So which will give you an opportunity to uh, to showcase your talents on the data engineering side. It says Azure Data Engineering Associate. Okay. But yeah, I think for us to actually pass this exam, we need to get into a mode, but mode of the actual learning, or in terms of theory and all that. So there'll be theoretical questions, practical oriented questions and all that. Okay, there is a certification that is nothing but DP203, and there are next level of advancements also. But yes, there is a certification in Azure, and that is nothing but DP203. Okay, I think if you have any doubt, you can unmute yourself and ask me the question on any other expectation or any other doubt. I mean, it may not be even relevant to this, but if you have anything else on the technology side on what we are going to learn, anything you can ask.
Sir, I have a doubt. Sorry, good morning, sir. Uh,
One.
Sir, means which level of we need knowledge in Python and PySpark, sir?
Yeah. Okay. I had to cover that. Yes, that's a good question. Okay. So during the sessions that we have on Azure Data Factory, okay, we will not have anything with respect to Python or the PySpark, okay, but the actual things comes into the picture when you start working on Azure Databricks, okay. So Azure Databricks is one such service that where you have to write the code in one of the language. So either the SQL scripting, or you can write the same thing in Python, or you can write it using Scala. Okay, but for you to get a basic understanding, right? So the Python, SQL scripting and Python are good enough. Okay, so PySpark is nothing but an extension, I should say, extension of the Python and all that. But what you need to basically understand is some basic commands, or I should say some basics, oops concepts. Okay, like suppose if you consider a situation, if I say like you just go ahead and call this method which is present, right? So basically how the things work in any of the oops related is that you'll have a method, and using a dot you'll try to extract the different methods within that class object or anything, right? So that is how but most of the things like uh, um, assume like you're trying to create a table, okay, in Azure Databricks. So when we're trying to learn about Azure Databricks, we'll get all this, okay. Trying to create a table, you can perform that using SQL scripting itself. You can write a SQL script and as well as Python, okay. I would say that it is good that you can do a very 101 session of Python, okay, and try to get the basic. But let me tell you, this is not all, okay. This comes in during the Azure Databricks session. But if you're already working in the IT field, or if you're having some basic understanding, this is not that difficult to manage yourself in understanding the Python scripting. Okay, so that is what you need to understand. But I will say, like, when you are into this course, or I should say when you are into this field of data engineering, right? So you have to keep learning with respect to the different either Python. At this point of time, I would say, like, you need not get very well versed, because you're just starting yourself here, right? You're launching yourself. The thing is that you need to launch yourself, and then you can become an actual expert in, when you try to work more and more on the Databricks clusters and all that. And Databricks, when you start working, you can see how this is actually working out. Okay, but let me tell you that whatever that you do on the PySpark, I should say, or the Python side of things in the Databricks, you can also do the same thing via SQL scripting. Within the Databricks itself, it actually offers some kind of a magic commands like this, where you can actually indicate whether your script is SQL, whether your script is Python, and it also offers us something on R. Okay, but our course will not touch base upon too many things about other languages, so it also talks about Scala. So that's the level of compatibility that he has given. I mean, the Azure Databricks service has offered us in trying to write it in any of the language that we wanted. Okay, you can do the same create table in Python using PySpark, and you can also do the same thing in the SQL also. Okay, so that's the level of flexibility that we will have. But at this point of time, you might need, when you start working more and more on the Databricks side. Okay, when you started working more on the Databricks side, you might need some understanding on the Python also. Okay, but the same thing, like I mentioned, okay, we'll have something called Azure data mapping flow, which we will try to cover it as a part of the same thing that you try to achieve in Python or SQL. You can also do it using a simple drag and drop interface called Azure mapping data flows. Okay, we call this as mapping data flows. Okay, I'll say, just simply answering your question, Arun, it's good to have the Python 101. So, and but yeah, we should not limit ourselves that we do not know about anything on the Python, and we should not back off. Okay, so basically we will have to try working out the things with respect to the same thing that we are trying to do using SQL scripting, and as well as Azure mapping data flows. So any of the transformations you can be start doing using mapping data flows, and the SQL script also. Okay. But it is good to have the Python 101. That means the basics of Python.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you can still unmute yourself. Any one of you, you can ask your questions or any other doubts that you have. I mean,
So Azure Blob is same as AWS bucket.
S3 buckets, yes. Or you have that buckets, right? Yes, you're right. It's a similar service.
It's a storage.
Exactly, storage.
Hello.
Yeah. Yes, please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes.
Uh, Hello. Are you covering data engineering means PySpark concepts as well?
We will be having some of the demos with respect to PySpark, like how to
Mm-hmm.
create delta tables, and then using some transformation on top of that, and we will try to do some kind of a string functions on the PySpark. We'll take one particular example and try to transform the data and all.
Yeah, if your demos means it will cover for the as per interview point of view, will that much depth will be there, or how many session will be there? Because most of the cases, the data engineering means PySpark will be there, as per my knowledge. Yeah, somebody as per knowledge. So we need more focus on that rather than Python. PySpark is need to be covered, right? PySpark.
Yeah. Yes, yes. So when I say Python 101, it is for you to get that understanding on PySpark only. So meaning that you will try to do the demos in such a way that from the interview point of view, let me tell you that uh, we will try to do some exercises on how to create the dimensions and facts using the PySpark itself. Okay, and that should give you a basic understanding. And the questions around would be mainly basing on the initial setup that we do and the different transformations that we do. And when I talk about the Delta Lakes, suppose if you have to, what are the advantages of having a Delta Lake and all, right? So basically, when we have the data and you have to, it basically supports some ACID transactions, right? Atomic ACID properties. So that's what the delta meaning means. So we will try to cover all those things and how to go back in point in time to restore any different version of the table and all. So we will cover all these topics as a part of the course.
Yeah. Yeah, last question. Nice. It's a blob means it's a storage type of like a flat file, all those things, or data type. What is a blob? Azure blob means.
It is not a data type, it is a
Okay.
storage. So that means you can store the large binary objects into the
Okay.
Azure blobs. And
Okay.
basically this operates in a relative flat structure. So the entire blob,
Okay.
if you try to store data, so there is no particular hierarchy. Suppose if you store a data in our hard disk, you see how that is stored. I mean, we can store it within a folder and there is a hierarchy
Yeah.
that is set up. But
Correct.
Azure blobs as such, they will not have any particular hierarchy. But as an improvement, what a blob can be converted into a V2. That means Azure Blob V2, which is nothing but a data lake. So that will give
So,
I mean, it gives you the next set of advantages. So we are going to discuss on that also. I mean, what is
so
the
in the
different
means side, we naked eye, we cannot see the data, right? To see the some tool is required to blob whatever if you store in the blob, it is needed some tools, or we can see direct go and see like in the
let
sense.
yeah, I got your question. See, this is a storage, but you are talking about a scenario where you are actually trying to see the file that is there or the object that is there, isn't it? If
Okay.
you have to
Hmm.
view an object, definitely that respective tool is needed. Like for example, if you try to just to store a .csv file, when I say .csv, it
Correct.
is comma separated values. You can
Correct.
simply just download and see.
Right.
Now, the same case, you're trying to view a video. You can also store
Correct.
videos in the blob. Okay, for
Correct.
to view the video, you cannot simply just see that, right? You have to download, you have to have a relevant tool with you. So that
Correct.
is how it operates. It is not that
Yeah.
we need to have some tool to view the data. It depends upon the object that you are actually trying to store.
Stored. Yeah. Yeah. But CSV type of means we can no need just we go and see. But your object type of data, binary data, in that type of case, we need some sort of tools to view the data. Okay.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So how many days this course duration?
It will take around like 25 sessions. So depending upon, and we will also try to offer few more sessions at the last. If you have any questions around if you have any challenges in doing the demos that are there, and ultimately if you are seeing anything else that you wanted some support on, So that is something that we're going to plan during weekends and all that, and schedule and come.
So in this session, they will cover resume preparation and guidance, somewhat questions, important questions, all those things, right? So, and also it will cover your course DP 202 to complete the certification as a data engineer, as a Microsoft, that one will cover, right?
See, it will cover some parts of it. Okay, to be frank,
Okay.
if you have to extensively do on DP203, then it will be a certification exam, a certification course. Okay, so they
Okay.
will
Okay.
cover some part of it, but you will get a practical overview here.
Okay.
What
Okay.
exactly happens in the real world? So you'll get a
Mhm.
practical overview. But if you are thinking about covering the complete DP in this course, then this course is not for you. You have to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
opt for a different.
Okay. 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 Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think if you still have any further questions or anything, I think we have uh, the organizer's number there, and you
Hi.
can.
I have one question.
Yeah, yes, Ashok.
Is there any scheduling tool for this? Actually, because these jobs has to run, right? What we call, I don't know whether it is jobs or mappings. So
Yeah.
how we are going to schedule this? That part also you are covering?
Yes, absolutely. So, and that will be an next level, because I was just trying to indicate you what are the different services that we use. So we'll have something called triggers, and we
Mhm.
will try to help you out in scheduling that. Uh, right. So with the help of triggers that we have, we'll try to schedule these jobs. So just
Okay.
like how
And
you think of schedule agent, right?
yeah.
Agent, SQL Server agent and all that. So it is like an agent. We call that as a trigger.
And one more thing, can we connect non-SQL databases also?
Absolutely. So it depends upon, so basically the main orchestrator is the Azure Data Factory here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The Azure Data Factory. And it offers a wide variety of connection things that are available. Be it MongoDB, be it NoSQL, any other DB that you have, right? It has that wide variety of connection enablers. Okay, so you should be able to connect to anything of that sort.
Okay, you mean to say I can connect any other physical server also? Correct, right?
Yes, considering the fact that it should enable there is something called integration runtime, which will be serving as a gateway when you are trying to access a physical server. Okay, if you are able to, so there'll be one particular session where I have my laptop and I have my cloud database. So
Mm-hmm.
using Azure Data Factory, I will set up that integration runtime on my laptop and try to connect to the on-premise. So we'll try to mimic that case where your data physically resides on some physical server and you're trying to bring in the data into the cloud. So that is what we will do in one of the session.
So you are going to cover that also.
Yes,
Okay, sure. Thanks a lot.
sure. I see that there's one more question. I think it is from Arun.
Yeah. So what is role here in Azure DevOps? Is this any used
Role
in
here.
this process Azure DevOps? Azure DevOps is
Absolutely.
used in
Hmm.
so we
Yeah,
have separate pipelines, na ETL. ETL pipe means we
correct.
have ETL pipelines or we need to go with Azure DevOps pipelines. I'm little bit
Okay.
confused about this.
Yes, yes, yes. If you already someone who knows about Azure DevOps will get confused. I'll tell you. So whatever ETL pipelines that I'm talking about are the pipelines that we create in Azure Data Factory. Okay. I'm talking about the ETL pipelines which we create in Azure DevOps Factory. But the same ETL pipelines, they store, or the raw form of that code is stored in JSON format. So that means whatever that you physically do on Azure Data Factory will be showcased as a ETL pipeline. Let me just show you that, so you will have a clear understanding. I will show you the
Meanwhile,
ETL pipeline and as well as the other pipeline. Yeah.
okay.
So,
Meanwhile, what is the class timings?
yeah, class timings would be usually the morning times, like around 7 to 8.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, if there is any change or anything, yeah, that will be communicated from the organizers. Let me just, yeah. Okay. So in Azure DevOps, I think you might be talking about the release pipelines. Okay, these release pipelines are for moving the code across the environments and all, right? So similarly, in Data Factory, we will try to create ETL pipelines, and these pipelines are different from the Azure DevOps pipelines that we create for merging the code and moving the code from one to another. So what we'll try to do in Azure DevOps is that, so there's a mechanism that you create in moving the code that is there in Azure Data Factory across the environments. So that part we are going to learn in Azure DevOps, how to manage our code and how to move it across the environments by creating a release pipeline. So that is what we are going to learn, the significance of Azure DevOps here. But there is no confusion here. Okay, it is both are called as pipelines. That is where the confusing part is. But one is a release pipeline, the other is an ETL pipeline. Okay, I'm just, because it is taking some time here, so
Okay.
okay, you can see
Okay, sir. Thank
that
you.
there is a project and all. So this is what you are talking about, right? So basically, if you have a project here, right, and you have a release pipeline that you will have, this pipeline that we are talking about, right? The release pipeline. But we try to create some of the Azure ETL pipelines in Azure Data Factory. So yeah, I'm just trying to help you to show that, but yeah, it's not. But I think, but I just made myself clear there. Okay. Any other questions?
One more question, sir. Yeah, that blob is using for storage, and what is data lake? It is also some another kind of service.
Yeah, so I was just telling about that when I think Narayan was asking about this question. So earlier
Yeah, yeah,
we used to
but
have something called Azure
huh,
Blob, okay, but that stores the data in a relatively the flat structure. No matter what you store, okay, it will goes into a flat structure. But we can convert that blob into a data lake and enable a hierarchical namespace there, hierarchical structure. So that is what is the difference, basic difference between a blob and a data lake. So and the data
So
lake
data lake.
also. Mhm.
So data lake is for long-term retention. Is that?
No, it is not about the retention part. It is about the features that are added when we have a data lake, right? So we will have a relatively a better structure. We'll have a relatively a better drivers to fetch the data from them. Okay, and basically it is also a kind of an indexed where we can retrieve that in a faster manner. But it doesn't talk about retention. Retention is something else. Like if you have a hot tier, cold tier, I mean, where you can keep the data for some days and you can set some expiration policies there. That is about the retention that we are talking about. But it's not more on the retention side. It is more of how the data is stored and how we are able to easily retrieve from the storage.
Okay, thank you. So retrieving data, is there a Azure query language, or is it some other tool like Power BI or Tableau we need to use to retrieve data?
See, the problem here is not about retrieval, right? The problem is the data which is present, is it relevant or not? Is it being really in a situation that business can straight away use it or not? That is where the data engineering comes into the picture. Like suppose you can have all your raw data ingested into a data lake, isn't it? You can just simply pull the data and put it into your data lake because storage is cheaper and we can simply just dump that files. But only thing is we have to transform that data and push it to a proper in a proper manner. Then only it will come into the retrieval and that then this Power BI tools come into the picture to actually showcase what you have.
So in these classes, we will learn like transforming into a like a normalized
Correct.
or common format.
Yes, we will try to
Okay.
understand like how to perform or pull in that data which is stored as some file or some kind of a source and try to push that data into a Azure SQL or whatever the
Okay. Thank you.
okay. Okay, thank you everyone for joining the session. Yes, looking forward to meet you in the classes. Thank you. Have a good weekend ahead. Bye bye.
Hello.
Yeah.
So actually, I am joining late. So
Yes.
can you please tell how many services you have covered? Actually, I am facing some technical issues, so I am joining after 10 to 20 minutes late.
Yeah, no problem. Actually, this is a recorded session. You can actually request for that link and try to get whatever that I discussed so far. But
Okay.
just to answer you in brief, right? So we are talking about Azure SQL, Azure Blob, Azure Data Lake, and we'll try to create Delta Lakes. And we are talking about Azure Data Bricks, Azure Data Factory, Azure Key Vaults. So, I mean, there are a number of things that I discussed during the call. So,
Okay.
I mean, namely, I just named a few of them to you.
Okay, sir. I will check the recording.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Is someone else is having any question? I saw someone. Okay, fine.
So, any projects you are covering in during this course? Any real-time project?
Any real-time project? So whatever that I discuss as a part of demo, right? Like suppose you have to start creating a dimension and try to push that. So it will be a kind of a suppose if your project is consisting of some 10 dimensions and 3, 4 fact tables, right? So basically we are going to discuss one instance of that, like discussing about few dimensions and the fact table, how to populate it. So, I mean, if you think that it is as a mini project, yes, yeah, that is what we
Oh.
will discuss in the sessions.
Sir, one last question. Here we need also knowledge of the Azure DevOps. It is enough than DevOps. ETL pipeline is enough. We need the knowledge on Azure DevOps also.
No, no. Azure DevOps, you need not have knowledge because see, everyone will not be able to create the ETL, release pipelines and all that. But as a part of this session, how do you manage in the deployments with respect to Azure Data Factory is something that we will cover in this session. So no matter whether you know or you don't know, what we will cover in this session is that how do you manage your deployments using Azure DevOps is what we will cover.
Okay. Thanks.
Sir, will you help us in resume preparation as well?
Okay, so that is not the mainstream of this particular course. Okay, but yeah, I had my earlier batch students who had kind of asked me in helping out. So what I did is I usually provide them some kind of a session. So in understanding what is that current thing that they are doing and how they can actually portray or convert that scenario into an Azure scenario. That is what I can help you with.
Okay. Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you very much.